Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. This evening, my special guests are Fatima Joji from the Aberdeen Yes movement. I think it's right to say, Fatima, correct me if I'm wrong, is it Aberdeen Yes or Aberdeen Independence Movement?
Aberdeen Independence Movement.
Okay, thank you, Fatima, for correcting me. And of course, joining us this evening also is our regular contributor, Sam Paton. Hi, Sam.
Hi Gordon, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, absolutely fine, Sam. So I'm going to crack on straight away with the coronavirus update first, and then we'll come to the day's news. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,423,888 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 1,280,173 were confirmed negative. 143,715 were positive. There are now 2,649 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There were 78 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases, with not everyone with the virus displaying symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,467 were in hospital last night, 100 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by coronavirus COVID-19 infections stood at 4,779. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures published today show that 78,508 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 1,162 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. This is the highest daily increase across the UK since April. And now a new update, and as at the 3rd of January, 6,686 deaths have been registered in Scotland, where the novel coronavirus was mentioned on the death certificate, according to statistics published by the National Records of Scotland today. Between the 21st of December to the 3rd of January, 383 deaths were registered that mentioned COVID-19 on the death certificate. The number of deaths for the week 21st to the 27th of December was 200, and 183 deaths were registered in the following week from the 28th of December to the 3rd of January. As there were fewer registrations than usual in these weeks due to public holidays, death registrations are likely to be lower than the actual numbers of deaths that occurred during these weeks. The statistics for the 28th of December to the 3rd of January show that 75% of the 183 deaths registered in the latest week were of people aged 75 and over, and 8% were aged under 65. The majority of deaths occurred in hospitals, representing 111 deaths. 63 occurred in care homes and 9 at home or in non-institutional settings. To place these statistics in context, the number of all-cause deaths registered in the week ending the 3rd of January was 1,156. For the previous week, it was 1,205. Both weeks were 14% higher than the average of the previous 5 years. Deaths from respiratory and circulatory causes and dementia Alzheimer's were lower than average for this time of year, resulting in the number of excess deaths, 138 in the latest week, being lower than the number of deaths where COVID-19 was the underlying cause. Now, if you would like to join the conversation here this evening, you could do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland7. And now to tonight's main story. It's the United States Congress certifies Joe Biden after a Donald Trump mob stormed the Capitol. Hours after hundreds of President Donald Trump's supporters stormed the US Capitol in a harrowing assault on American democracy, a shaken Congress formally certified Democrat Joe Biden's election victory early this morning. The outcome of the certification proceedings was never in doubt, but it was interrupted by rioters who forced their way past metal security barricades, broke windows and scaled walls in their fight to fight their way into the Capitol. Immediately afterwards, the White House released a statement from Trump in which he pledged an orderly transition when Biden is sworn into office on January the 20th, although he repeated his false claim that he had won the November election. Yesterday, the president had fired up his supporters to overturn the election results before a mob stormed the Capitol. The destructive and shocking images at the Capitol of what other Republicans called an insurrection filled television screens in America and around the world, a deep stain on Trump's presidency and legacy as his tenure nears its end. In certifying Biden's win, longtime Trump allies such as the Vice President Mike Pence and the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell rejected his pleas for intervention, while violence at the Capitol spurred several administration officials to quit. Among them was Mick Mulvaney, a former White House Chief of Staff who resigned his post as a special envoy to Northern Ireland. I wouldn't be surprised to see more of my friends resign over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours, he said on CNBC. A source familiar with the situation said that there have been discussions among some cabinet members and Trump allies about invoking the 25th Amendment, which would allow a majority of the cabinet to declare Trump unable to perform his duties and making Pence the acting president. A second source doubted the effort would go anywhere given that Trump has less than 2 weeks left in office. Democratic senior Senator Amy Klobuchar said that Trump's cabinet should be ready to act, as Trump could stir more trouble ahead of Biden's inauguration. The counting of the electoral votes in the presidential election by Congress, normally a formality, was preceded by weeks of threats in social media that planned pro-Trump protests could descend into violence. Despite those rumblings of danger, the Capitol Police Force did not request advance help from other federal agencies, such as the Department of Home, were not mobilised until more than an hour after the protesters had first breached the barricades. In stark contrast, those agencies were aggressively deployed by the Trump administration during last summer's Black Lives Matter protests in Washington and elsewhere in the United States. Fatima, let me come to you first this evening. The results of the elections in America are now pretty much a foregone conclusion. But Donald Trump really seems to be leaving office with a lot of bad feeling, and to have violent rioters invading the Capitol is absolutely unheard of, isn't it?
I mean, if you told me like say 5 or 10 years ago that I was going to wake up on the 6th of January yesterday and find out that supporters of Trump, encouraged by Trump, were going to storm the Capitol building, I wouldn't even give your claim a second thought. I would think that I wouldn't even believe you. So to see something play out in America and to see the way the police are not even, the police response as well is as if they're not even properly challenging what's going on. And the fact that Donald Trump is encouraging something like this, it just shows you his disdain for democracy and how little respect he has for a democratic outcome. So it is truly terrifying that a leader of what's supposedly the free world has encouraged an act like this. That's it's an affront to democracy. It's a complete assault and an insult to democracy. We saw the deaths of 5 people. I think they confirmed that it was 4 or 5 people who died. Within a few hours of it happening, one person was declared dead. So we're looking at violence, riots, and this vision. Like, I'm sort of speechless because it's not something that I would have ever thought I would witness coming from the result of an election in a country such as America. But I think we need to understand that this is something that has been brewing for quite a few years now since he entered office, and we are suddenly seeing the results of it today. It's not as if it was something that just all of a sudden happened. This is because we are letting people like Trump, their fascism, their tendency to incite violence and hatred, we're allowing it to go unchecked. So this is something that has been brewing for quite a while now. And to see it play out like this is completely devastating to watch. And I feel that the UK as a whole, Scotland already, we know, the First Minister has condemned these actions, and she's always made it clear that she does not condone Boris Johnson's actions or his disrespect for democracy. It's in our best interest that we come out strong and completely show that we do not approve of behaviour like this, because it's not democratic and it's not what democracy should look like.
Fatima, some commentators in the United States were comparing the way the security forces at the Capitol behaved when they were confronted by, well, predominantly white protesters. And it's been alleged that they basically retreated from the situation. They weren't as aggressive as, for example, some of the police were towards protesters in the Black Lives Matter campaign more recently. Is there, do you think, still evidence from Trump supporters that there is an undercurrent of racism still within that demographic?
I think many people have picked up on that fact online, and there were even some interesting analysis and some even images on Twitter, where Twitter is known for its memes and images, just in telling a story in 1,000 words, how your skin color could be the difference between how you are treated by the police and supporters of Trump. You would expect to see the police to address these protesters and their actions with greater concern and consideration for the safety of the American people and for the safety of democracy. But what we saw is either they've decided they'll stop police brutality, or you'll only be at the receiving end of police brutality if you're a certain color. So it seems that, to me, what I saw is that police brutality can be avoided, but only if you're a certain kind of person. That's what I saw. So I need to be convinced that they either stopped it, because right now I'm just convinced that there is some underlying racism. There is this assumption that if it's a black person, that there's significant need for some force. And obviously, if you look at history, black people have always been approached with such force and brutality within the police. It did spark a huge wave of Black Lives Matter movement. So I stand by the fact that I do feel that there is racism. There is evidently so, actually. It's not just a feeling. There is racism within the police, and their actions yesterday, where we even saw scenes of police escorting some of the protesters, somehow looking at they're protecting them in comparison to the way they were using tear gas and force on Black Lives Matter protesters, who weren't even as much force as that. Like,
they were nowhere near the Capitol, were they?
Make it. Yeah, we saw them storm the Capitol. We saw someone manage to sit down in the Capitol. If it was a black person, they would absolutely not get that far.
Okay,
so it is privilege. Yeah, it is privilege, and it is white privilege. So
okay,
absolutely.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Sam, coming to you now, I also noticed on social media, I'm not sure if it's been on the mainstream media, that some of the protesters, when they got into the Capitol building, started to fly the Confederate flag, which is widely associated with the slavers. And in fact, I suppose that the Confederates being on the losing side of the Civil War. Is this not even more evidence, as if we didn't need any more, that there is a huge streak of racism in Trump's support?
Yeah, Gordon, I think it is. I think you're right. I think it's been mostly on the social media rather than mainstream about the flying of the Confederate flag. And I've seen that as well, and it was absolutely quite disgusting. But, you know, it's just, Fatima's right. I think the whole situation is just the police brutality. I mean, there was absolutely none of that when you actually sit and watch the clips that are coming out from the Capitol. You know, the police are literally just standing back and allowing it to happen. At one point, the police are actually helping people to get down the stairs. Police officers are helping a couple of the people come down the stairs. And it's just absolutely crazy that the fact that, you know, we knew this was going to happen. You know, the way Trump's been winding his supporters up, it was just a matter of time before something like this was going to go on.
Okay, Sam, well, listen, thank you very much. We're going to move on now back to the famous B word, Brexit. And Brexit is jeopardising Scotland's thriving export industries. One of Scotland's leading seafood exporters has said that Scottish firms shipping seafood to Europe in recent days have faced a horror show thanks to the disruption caused by Brexit-related trade rules. James Cook of DR Collins said that Brexit has changed the whole business, claiming that the UK Tory government promised the industry frictionless trade, and we've got no trade. It's actually ground to a halt. The Chief Executive of Scotland Food and Drink, James Withers, also blasted the Brexit-induced delays, saying that the problems sadly come as a little surprise, and warning that the financial impact of disruption to seafood exports would be grave for many. In 2018, it was estimated that fish and seafood exports were worth around £944 million to Scotland's economy. Commenting, the SNP MSP for Aberdeen South and North Kirkcaldy, Maureen Watt, said this time last year, sending high-quality seafood from Scotland to markets in the EU was seamless and effortless. In less than a week, Brexit and the new rules for trading with our closest overseas neighbours are causing some to stop trading altogether. Our seafood is renowned across Europe, with thousands of people employed in the industry, which is worth millions to our economy. But Boris Johnson and his Tory puppets north of the border don't have a clue. After all the assurances to the export industry, they've sold out our fishing and seafood sector, putting jobs and businesses on the line. The Scottish Government said that it will keep working hard to help businesses get their paperwork in order and to make processes needed now in Scotland as easy as they can be. But there is little that they can do to fix the problems being caused by the UK Government's systems and approach. Fatima, I dare say this is not a great big surprise to you. I don't think it's a surprise to many of us that the seafood industry in Scotland would be one of the hardest industries hit by Brexit.
Absolutely. This is an outcome that many did foresee coming. It is an outcome that I know that the SNP, for instance, have been trying to warn Boris Johnson that this is what's going to happen. We need to protect the seafood industry, for instance, against these harsh Brexit trade deals that he's already pushed through. And we are talking about as you mentioned earlier, you mentioned a figure of 944 million are exports. Yeah. So we're talking about exports worth nearly £1 billion that are disrupted. And we need to think as well that the administrative burdens for exporters and importers of food as well, because we're going to look at so much damage done by this. It's going to be increasingly difficult for us to be able to feed into our economy, all because of a trade deal and because of a Brexit that we did not vote for. So I do believe in these major disruptions. I do believe that we are seeing the negative impact already, and so soon as well. And we need to consider the fact that the seafood industry employs many people. It employs so many people, so we need to think of the impact it will have on jobs as well, not only on the economy but on people's livelihoods, jobs. We're going to see many more people struggling to meet ends meet, and obviously to a larger extent the impact it will have on income poverty. So yes, Brexit has jeopardised Scotland's thriving export industry, and the trade deal as it stands, I don't see any positive outcome coming from it. That's why I believe that the only way that we can see an improvement is if Scotland rejoins the EU as an independent country. Sorry to end that way, because that's the only outcome I see for us now, because it's very clear that this has caused a lot of damage to import and export. And we have seen images of lorries queued up, stuck at the border, trying to get in and deliver their goods as well. So absolutely.
Okay, Fatima, thank you. Sam, very briefly, if you would, Fatima has just outlined the problems facing the seafood industry. But of course, these jobs are also in rural areas, aren't they, Sam? How on earth the rural economy is going to manage if these jobs go?
I wish I knew, Gordon. I really don't know. And yeah, the rural communities are really going to suffer through this. And they are, the seafood industry is quite big in the rural communities. And I mean, one of the things is to remember it's not just going to affect the seafood industries, it's affecting all the industries right across Scotland,
Yeah.
even for small businesses like myself. We now need to fill out a customs declaration, and the cost of posting to Europe has went up. So it's going to affect quite a lot of industries, importing and exporting goods,
Yeah.
and more, like your seafood, your food and drink industries, but also your gift industries as well,
Okay.
which is a lot of small businesses too.
Well, we'll be talking about that just in a moment, Sam. In fact, in our very next story. Customers in Europe have been hit by post-Brexit charges when buying from the UK. Customers in Europe buying products ranging from furniture to pet food from UK companies are receiving unexpected bills for VAT and customs declarations, or finding household names and stopping shipping to the continent as post-Brexit trading rules bite. We bought a €47, that's £42 shelf, from Next for our bathroom, said Tom Basley, who lives in Marseille. On the morning it was supposed to be delivered, we received an import duty tax demand for over €30, like a ransom note. It came as a complete surprise. A Frankfurt resident who ordered cycle clothing from a UK company was sent a tax and customs demand for €102, while a woman in the Netherlands who bought trousers in December with no issues faced a €40 bill for 2 more pairs ordered in January. Chris Hickson, a retired logistics and freight forwarding expert living in France, said that many people may have been surprised because they believed the tariff-free trade deal negotiated between the UK and the EU meant that there would be no extra charges. Since the end of the Brexit transition period, however, continental customers must complete both a customs declaration for goods imported from the UK, a procedure generally performed by transporters, for which consumers will be charged, frequently up to €20 per declaration, and to pay national VAT. Now, Fatima, this is an issue which has also exercised a lot of people on social media recently, particularly this business of companies having to collect VAT before they send an item to the customer. And it's claimed that this is putting off many overseas firms from importing their goods to the UK, and likewise firms from the UK finding it difficult as well to export to Europe when their goods are now so much more expensive.
Look, this is another cost of Brexit, making goods and services more expensive for us to even access. The figures you've quoted earlier, we're seeing the price of getting access to these goods and services amount to almost like the same as how much they actually cost.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely horrifying to look at, to be honest, because basically you're almost paying double the price for one item. So we did see earlier on in last year, sorry, it sounds December and January are so close together.
Yeah.
We did see just in December last year, just a month ago, supermarket giants such as Tesco warning of higher prices if the UK and EU fail to agree to Brexit, to a trade deal in this area. But now they're passing off a trade deal as if it's been positive for us, but it's actually had such an impact on what we can actually access in terms of basically due to proximity. We're in the same continent, but this is the result of leaving the EU and having a more expensive, having to pay more to actually access basic services. So it is a terrifying outcome, and it is one that's going to have a significant impact on people's standard of living as well, because people won't be able to afford these services. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Fatima. Sam, you were mentioning that your own business is going to be hit by these charges. Have you seen this happening already in your own small business?
Yeah, Monday morning, funny enough, it was one of those ones that get caught off guard. You just totally forget about it, and you just totally, go to the post office, and it's one of those ones. But and it's hitting all the small businesses, and this is the thing. We've all been talking about it, and I should have known better because we have been talking about this and knew it was going to happen, that when Brexit came about, that this is the kind of things we are going to be hit with, but talking about it and actually the realisation of it is two total different things, and it's going to hit so many small businesses, because there's so many, especially in Scotland, there are so many small businesses that export to Europe for gifts, and like myself, and this is going to hit us really badly. And also the food and drink industry we're just talking about as well. The only good thing about this is, it doesn't affect a letter or if you're sending a postcard, but if you're sending anything with goods in it, like a small parcel, you need to fill out a customs declaration form, and basically it's higher postage, and and all the businesses that voted for Brexit, not realising this was going to happen.
You would think they must have known, Sam, but there you go. Anyway, Sam.
But it's amazing the ones that didn't realise.
Now we're in the reality of Brexit, Sam, eh?
Okay, yeah, we certainly are.
Let's move on now. Tens of thousands of people in Scotland may be hit by hostile NRPF policy. The SNP has challenged the Tory government to scrap its hostile no recourse to public funds, or NRPF policy. The latest estimates from the House of Commons Library suggesting that there are likely to be around 88,000 people in Scotland affected by the policy and excluded from support. The policy restricts access to welfare, housing and financial support due to somebody's immigration status. With many people enduring a difficult year during the devastating impact of the coronavirus pandemic has had on jobs and income, the SNP has warned that many vulnerable people face a double hit, as they're also prevented from accessing crucial financial support, including universal credit and housing assistance. Estimates from the House of Commons Library for the SNP suggest that in Scotland there could be around 88,000 people hit by the policy, with the figure rising to around 1.36 million people across the United Kingdom. In Scotland, the SNP government recently announced a further £278,784 for 6 organisations to support people subject to Westminster's no recourse to public funds policy. Earlier, an SNP written parliamentary question led to the Home Office staggeringly admitting that it has no idea how many people the policy affects. Recent reports have shone a light on the devastating impact of the policy, with the Children's Society warning that there are thousands of children in the UK facing deep long-term poverty because of strict immigration rules, which means that their families cannot access mainstream benefits or vital support, even in a crisis. The separate report, Access Denied, the cost of no recourse to public funds policy, found that not only are children from NRPF families often restricted from accessing means-tested support, such as free school meals, they're also more likely to experience homelessness and poverty. Fatima, let's come to you first of all. This is a terrible policy. It discriminates actively against people who are fleeing from war zones, who may have come to the United Kingdom or come to Scotland to escape persecution, and they find themselves persecuted again when they arrive here. This surely can't be allowed to keep happening.
It is appalling, because this is policies targeting vulnerable people whose lives are already in danger. And the NRPF policy, as we're seeing it now, it certainly needs to be reconsidered, because it will halt efforts to reduce homelessness, as you've mentioned homelessness as well. It's such a backward step. It's punishing people who experience all these hardships. I also know it from the angle of domestic violence, domestic abuse as well, because survivors of domestic abuse are faced with destitution and homelessness as a result of the UK government's no recourse to public funds policy, NRPF. And I am aware that the SNP, for instance, has called on the UK government to suspend this policy during COVID at least, so that vulnerable people, on top of the pandemic we have already, can get the basic access to help that they need, certainly. And I am aware that Alison Thewlis as well, MP, has challenged the UK government on this, because it's affecting asylum seekers, those with disabilities, and it's leaving people behind. So it's a policy that targets vulnerable people. It's a policy that targets marginalised people, and it is the fact that the UK government is not budging on it just shows that we've got a government who is far removed from the realities of the way people are living, for them to even overlook the impact that this policy is having. So it's a policy that is very difficult to look at and to accept. And all I'm seeing is it's just creating us, it's just taking us backward in our efforts to try and resolve these issues, such as homelessness and survivors of domestic abuse who need help. So it's absolutely something we need to look into.
Okay, thank you, Fatima. Sam, again, sorry, briefly, if you would. This is an appalling policy, but surely this is another part of Priti Patel, Home Secretary's hostile environment policy towards immigration, isn't it?
Come on, it's Priti Patel, isn't it? And the thing is, this policy's been around since the 80s, and it's been embedded into the Immigration Asylum Act since 1999. It's been around for a very, very long time. And the thing is, it's about time it was completely done away with, because it's unethical. It's designed to target the most vulnerable in our society, people who need a lot of support, who are fleeing dangerous situations. But again, this is Priti Patel and the current Tory government, who are very, very nasty pieces of work, and they are not going to be doing that very soon. And one of the things I find disgusting, that if there's a family and if the parents are basically not entitled to claim any benefits, and then there is no they cannot claim child benefit on behalf of the children. They are unable to do that.
Sam,
again, that's affected children.
Sam, I was just going to ask you, with this policy being designed by the Conservative Party, do you think that they are trying to send a message to potential migrants not to come to the UK because they will be victimised in this way? They will be made an example of. Do you think that is what this is about?
Yeah, basically it's been designed, Gordon, to be hostile and create a hostile environment, and to say that, people who are vulnerable and in danger are not welcome to come to this country and to seek shelter. And it is absolutely awful. It is absolutely awful. Whereas, unfortunately up here in Scotland, our hands are tied behind our back, and this is one of the things we are tied to with Westminster. But we have a slightly different attitude. Thank goodness we have a different attitude to welcoming people to this country and to offer a welcome hand and try and help people out when they need it. And these people are not scroungers or anything like that. These are human beings. These are human beings, and some of them are very, very highly educated and contribute to our society. Indeed. And this is the thing they do not seem to understand the UK government.
Sam, sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. We're running a little bit low on time and we'll need to move on. Now, Boris Johnson says that there would be no COVID vaccine in an independent Scotland. Boris Johnson has made a bizarre attack on Scottish independence by claiming that there would not have been a single COVID-19 vaccine in Scotland if it were up to Nicola Sturgeon's party. Addressing a virtual meeting of the 1922 committee of backbench Conservative MPs on Tuesday evening before Wednesday's Commons vote on the third national lockdown in England, the Prime Minister highlighted the threat of the new COVID-19 variant, but is also said to have criticised Nicola Sturgeon. Johnson tackled a series of questions from backbenchers on the Zoom call, including one from a Scottish Tory MP about the SNP, the answer to which took aim at the pro-independence party. The Prime Minister is understood to have said that the strength of the union lay in what could be done for people across the UK, claiming that if it were up to the SNP, no coronavirus vaccines would have been delivered in an independent Scotland. Now, Fatima, I'm sure you want to respond to this particular affront, because it is an affront, isn't it? The SNP is being targeted by the Prime Minister here. What is Boris Johnson up to?
Okay, first of all, we are expected to listen to someone who has basically who has overseen possibly one of the worst COVID responses, whose public health guidance has been awful. We've seen under his leadership so much damage done by coronavirus due to his inability to actually implement the safety measures that were needed, to the point that Scotland, for instance, and other developed nations felt necessary to respond in a manner in which was necessary, because we had Boris Johnson, who was not taking this virus seriously, who was not listening to recommended advice, who even wanted to go with a herd immunity response, which was proven to be ineffective. So we're expected to listen to him saying that, left to Scotland, that we would not have the COVID vaccine. We have seen in Scotland's response, we have seen the First Minister stand up nearly every day for long to answer questions. She doesn't shy away from the media. Boris and his cabinet stopped talking to the media, addressing questions, but we've seen the First Minister do the complete opposite of what he was doing. She came out of this, tackled head on, and cleared up everything, has taken such important measures that in contrast, the damage that the coronavirus has done in England compared to Scotland is stark. And we've got to remember, this is a global effort. The coronavirus, it involves so many companies, so many countries as well. So his assumption that an independent Scotland wouldn't have access to the COVID vaccination when it is a global effort is just absurd.
It's nonsense, isn't it?
It is absolutely, and it's laughable coming from him, because I maintain the fact that he's overseen possibly one of the worst COVID responses, and he's standing up there saying that Scotland wouldn't get a COVID vaccine from a global effort. That would certainly include an independent Scotland, who has had great people involved as well in the science of COVID. So absolutely no, I wouldn't give it a second thought even. And as soon as I heard about this, I kind of just laughed. So no, it's him reaching for want of a better term.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fatima. Sam, again, very, very briefly, if you would, and try not to laugh when you're giving your response to Mr. Johnson's pronouncement.
I'm going to be quite serious actually this evening, Gordon. If Scotland was independent, if we kind of flip the coin, right, and we're living currently in a parallel universe with Scotland being completely independent away from the UK government, our borders would be closed. We would be, and anybody entering and leaving Scotland would possibly be subject to testing and quarantine. And there's a very strong possibility that our COVID numbers and victims would be a lot less than what they currently are. Our NHS currently would not be at the stretching point of chaos, and probably we've been in a similar situation to the likes of New Zealand and such, where we've got a bit more of a life. We wouldn't be living in lockdown. We wouldn't be having all these restrictions placed upon us. We would probably have a universal basic income. And also as well, I believe Nicola Sturgeon was described on the American news channels last night as a world leader. So the chances are, in an independent Scotland, if it wasn't Nicola Sturgeon but another leader we've got as First Minister, or whoever we choose to call them and address them, would have a very good relationship with Europe and the rest of the world, and within the scientific community, and we would have access to a vaccination.
Of course we would. Okay, well listen, Sam, we're going to have to leave that subject there, but we're staying with the subject of the coronavirus in the next item. The police are warning the public about coronavirus scams. People in Scotland are asked to be alert to the potential for scam messages purporting to offer coronavirus vaccines or asking for payment for vaccines. Chief Inspector Anton Stevenson of Police Scotland's Safer Communities Division said that we are aware of a scam circulating involving a text message suggesting people are eligible for the coronavirus vaccine. If you're concerned or if you have provided personal or financial information via a link in a message of this sort, contact the Police Scotland via 101. We will pursue anyone who sets out to cause harm and misery to our communities, and officers work closely with partners to make Scotland a hostile environment for scammers. Our Take 5 campaign, which launched recently, raises awareness of fraud and highlights ways people can protect themselves and remain vigilant to this kind of crime. Always be aware that an unsolicited telephone call, email or text message may not be from the person or organisation which it appears to be from. Never click on a link in a message that you're not expecting. And remember, the NHS will never ask you for money in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Take 5 Prevent Fraud campaign features a range of tips for members of the public about how to protect themselves from fraudsters and to avoid falling victim to scam attempts. Information is available on Police Scotland's website. That's www.scotland.police.uk/take5. Well, briefly, Fatima, what's your reaction to this? Police Scotland are warning people about scammers. There always seems to be somebody who wants to take advantage of people's misery, doesn't there?
I think in these situations, what we can ensure we do is to make a clear statement, ensure that the public is aware of how they will be contacted regarding the vaccine and how they will go about receiving it. I think it's just clarity in messaging, and I think because obviously people will respond to scammers if they don't know, if they're not clear on the process, if they're not clear on how they will be contacted. So it's a matter of being clear in communication, and we need to do, as a member of the public, we need to be aware of the process and ensure that our closest people, our relatives, the most vulnerable people are aware of the measures and processes in which the COVID vaccine will be administered. So I think it's just a matter of keeping it, because it is a sad situation that we are having scammers contact people in an already vulnerable situation. We're already all vulnerable in this country due to COVID. Okay. So it is awful. So we need to keep the communication clear.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Sam, very briefly, I mean, this kind of thing goes on all the time, but this seems particularly nasty, doesn't it?
All scams are nasty, Gordon, and unfortunately they're designed to target those who are
scared or
like the vulnerable in our society, like the elderly and those who are isolated, and this is the perfect breeding ground for scammers, because so many people are isolated. They don't have their family round about them. They don't want to be phoning their family to bother them, to ask them if I've had this phone call or this message, what do I do? Yeah. And basically, we all have a duty to look out for each other and make sure our relatives, our elderly relatives and neighbours are aware that if they receive any of these messages, to ignore them.
Contact the police as well.
Contact the police, because a lot of people, especially at the moment, they don't want to, because they don't want to be a nuisance. Yeah. And especially with a lot of the elderly or people that don't have access to the internet and don't use social media, they will have doubts about how the contact trace service would contact them. So they are open to these scams. So the best thing as members of the public that we can do is, when you're speaking to an elderly neighbour, or, just make sure that they are aware that these are going on, and not to, give details over the phone or click on links and messages.
Yeah. Okay, listen, Sam, I'm sorry to have to cut you off there, but we'll need to get through our next items. Now, the eviction ban is to be extended. A temporary ban on eviction orders will be extended until the end of March. Regulations will be laid in the Scottish Parliament on the 14th of January to extend the current ban, which is in place at present until the 22nd of January. The extended ban will apply to all evictions in areas subject to level 3 or 4 restrictions, except cases of serious antisocial behaviour, including domestic abuse. Subject to review every 3 weeks to ensure it remains necessary to protect against the spread of coronavirus COVID-19. It will remain in force until the 31st of March. This will provide renters with safe homes during the pandemic. It will reduce the burden on local authorities who have a duty to rehouse people made homeless through evictions. And it will also make it easier for people to follow the guidelines during the current lockdown. Fatima, this is another good move, isn't it, from the Scottish Government? I believe that they are making sure that this ban is extended to protect vulnerable renters during the pandemic.
Absolutely. The message is stay home, and lifting the eviction ban leaves people more vulnerable to losing their homes. They'll be turned out on the streets. We'll see an increase. They'll be turned out on the streets. We'll see an increase in rough sleeping, homelessness, and you don't want that during a pandemic when we're seeing another strain of virus that's spreading significantly, which will put a greater strain on the NHS. So this is absolutely the right move. We need to consider where we're going to do more harm than good, and applying that test and banning landlords or banning evictions in general, banning landlords from evicting people or just banning evictions in general is the best move we have to ensure that people are able to stay home and adhere to the rules and to stop the unnecessary spread of the virus. So it's a logical step, a needed step, and I welcome this move. And I do hope to see it extended further when we do need it. Yeah.
Okay, Fatima, thanks very much. Sam, what's your view on this? A good news story again from the Scottish Government?
Yeah, it is, and it's common sense to basically have this in place. But I would like to see it go further, because the thing is a lot of people are having problems right now, contacting the local authorities or online for things like housing benefit. And at the moment, because everybody's working from home and there's a backlog, and if people are losing their jobs or they don't know what's happening, because there's still certain industries that, it might not be able to offer furlough, people on 0-hour contracts and things. So I would like to, the fact is, it's very much welcome it, but however, I would like to see it go further, because at the end of March, this is not going to be over with. There's going to be a kind of backlog, and, where paperwork and things is going to take a while to catch up, so we need it in place for a wee bit longer on that, just to protect people and to make sure they've got a roof over their heads.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. Okay, now to Denmark. Denmark has charged 2 British nationals over Cum-Ex trading schemes. The Danish prosecutor said on Thursday that they had charged 2 British nationals with unlawfully obtaining more than 9 billion Danish crowns via a sham trading scheme to make double tax reclaims. The fraud scheme, known as Cum-Ex trading, involved submitting more than 3,000 applications to the Danish Treasury on behalf of investors and companies from several countries around the world in order to receive dividend tax refunds, the prosecutor said. The state prosecutor, Per Fig, said that the 2 defendants committed cynical and meticulously planned fraud and described the case as extremely serious. One of the charged resides in Dubai and the other in the United Kingdom. All measures would be employed to bring the defendants in front of a Danish court, where both face a maximum penalty of up to 12 years imprisonment, the prosecutor said. The prosecutor has already seized more than 3 billion crowns from various persons and companies, but says receiving the remaining funds could be difficult. The proceeds originating from crime are often paid out to organised criminal networks which distribute the money globally through clever systems. This generally means that it's very difficult or almost impossible to get the money back again, Fig said. In March last year, 2 British bankers were handed suspended jail terms and a large penalty in Germany's biggest post-war fraud trial of a scam involving large trades to get bogus tax reclaims. Okay, let's come to you, Fatima. Now, somebody here obviously is trying to capitalise on a system of tax refunds from the Danish Treasury. But it's surprising, how many of these things are still going on, and this is involving at least one UK resident as well.
That's disappointing abroad as well. So fraud of any kind, we know it's a crime. We need to think of the colossal damage it has on the victims, and I would absolutely support any circumstance in where they are being prosecuted, and I hope they do meet the full extent of the law when they commit acts such as these. But I feel that more needs to be done to actually toughen up measures and the way we approach these scams, because I feel not enough is done to actually protect people from these. from this, which makes it a lot easier for scammers to find new ways to manipulate people. So definitely we need to look into tightening up the laws. We're not doing enough. And yes, I do believe, and I hope so, that they do face the full extent of the law for doing something, a criminal act like this.
Okay, thank you very much, Fatima. Sam, I know that we all hate fraudsters, but this one seems to be massive, 9 billion Danish crowns. I'm not sure what that translates into in euros or pounds, but it sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I'm just kind of reading up on this, and it's absolutely fascinating and fantastic. That this has been going on, and people have been getting away with this for it seems to be quite a few years, and it's right across Europe. And it seems to be, this seems to be a way, a tax fraud scheme discovered round about 2017. And it's about a way of obtaining billions from the European treasuries through suspected fraud and speculation involving dividend taxes. It's just absolutely wow.
Wow. I would imagine, Sam, that these two guys are now on the run somewhere, out with the jurisdiction of the Danish authorities.
Well, I hope they're caught and basically, put to trial, because it's a lot of money, and the thing is, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer that suffers from it. It's it's us out here, whether it's Denmark, UK or Germany or any of the other countries that have had this happen to, it's us at the bottom that actually we're losing, suffer from it.
Okay, listen, Sam, I'm going to move on to our final story tonight. This one is quite a big story. Now, more media rumours have been circulating about cancelling the Holyrood elections. A report in The Telegraph talks about postponing this May's Scottish elections, following similar stories in The Times and the Daily Record. The Holyrood Parliament has already passed an elections bill last year to make provision for holding a safe Scottish election on May the 6th. A media insider said that this is starting to seem as if there's a campaign to give these stories undue prominence, and prompts the question, who is behind what appears to be a campaign to suppress democracy in Scotland, and what is their motive? This is quite a story, Fatima. I'm sure you've probably seen these stories circulating and on the newspapers, in the front pages of the newspapers today. Is this a concerted attack on Scotland's democracy, and who do you think might be behind it?
Well, I think I did read somewhere that pressure was put on her by the opposition. And it is rather interesting that they would want to put a halt to democracy in this manner. Democracy is an important process of our democracy is an important process, and there are many ways that we can make it safer to continue with this democratic process. And I feel that at this stage, I don't think it's necessary at this stage to consider making such a decision like this to postpone the elections. People are starting to get vaccinated, the first dose, where people are starting to receive the first dose of the vaccine. They've decided to extend it to 12 weeks, which means that everyone could get the first dose before getting this, and then we can go back to the cycle and give everyone the second dose. I have looked into I'm sure many people have heard this decision about the way the dose will be given, but there's actually a justification behind it. And,
yes, we interviewed Professor Bald the other night, and she was explaining why they could do this. Sam, let me ask you. Possible. Sorry, Fatima. If I could come to you briefly, Sam. We know that the vaccine is on the way, and we've also seen, first of all, a massive general election in America. 50 states had a general election in the middle of a pandemic. Brexit has gone ahead in the middle of a pandemic. Surely this is just nonsense coming from the UK newspapers.
And that's just to name a couple, Gordon. There's been elections being held around the world, through the pandemic. And at the end of the day, it's propaganda. All it's doing is planting the seed to sow doubt that for some reason Scotland can't have their democracy, and that's exactly what it is, and it's deliberate. But it's funny how these people are the same people who have criticised America and what's going on over there in terms of democracy. So so you wonder. But yeah, it's basically propaganda to plant the seed of doubt into the people of Scotland, to try and make out that it's not safe to hold an election. But the wonderful thing is we have great technology. We've got ways around it. There's a vaccine out there,
Well,
so
yeah, Sam, Professor Bald was saying just the other night, or Monday night, that they plan to have 2 million people vaccinated before the summer. And that is, a vast majority of the adult population of Scotland.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is, as well, sorry, I've got a wee person coming into the but no, the thing is, at the end of the day, it's just trying to sow the seed of doubt. That's exactly what it is. It's the propaganda machine starting to, turn itself on, and it's just another one of those wee stories that they're hoping is going to grab people and grow arms and legs, and hopefully it won't, and people won't fall for it.
I hope not, Sam. And Fatima, just one more question for you. I heard recently somebody saying that the United Kingdom managed to hold general elections during World War II, and that didn't stop democracy. So why should Scotland suspend its democracy for basically a disease which is going to be under control, we would imagine, by the time this general election is happening?
That's true, and some people might argue that we're in different times and we respond to situations differently. I think back then we're a bit more relaxed on saving. Well, technically, it's not as today, where people put more pressure on governments to do more to protect the lives of people compared to back then. I think people were more try to go about their day as normal as they can. But so we could argue that our approaches and government approaches are quite different today. But it is a vaccine that we have. There is a vaccine out there. Many people will get the first dose, which would offer some form of protection. We could still go about making it safe. We've seen the US elections have gone ahead, even though we do question their response to COVID. But we have seen that there are many safe ways to do this. And at this stage, I've seen it's coming from the opposition, which raises a lot of questions to me, to be honest. I think it's just trying to instill some kind of unrest amongst people, active political people. And my own Aberdeen, the campaign that I'm involved in, Aberdeen Independence Movement, we are pushing out a postal vote campaign just to show the importance of postal voting, which is another way of voting, and kind of offer some people protection against this COVID if they don't want to go out. So,
some people may be shielding.
Voting, exactly. And
of course, proxy votes exist as well, don't they, Fatima? We can use a proxy to vote for you.
Yeah, you've got proxy votes, but it is we want to bust, because there is some uncertainty around postal voting as well, and we want to show that it's actually a safe method. All these conspiracy theories, we want to do some myth busting. So there are other options, and I do feel that democracy can go ahead. So people who are trying to stifle it at this stage should probably just have a hard look at why they're trying to do it.
Well, I'm going to give Sam one final word. Sam, do you think this is the losing side who are frightened of the general election and the referendum to follow, knowing that they're going to lose, just simply trying to prevent it happening or to delay it?
Crikey, one final word, Gordon. That's impossible in my word.
Have a go, Sam.
They are.
Have a go.
They are basically looking to delay it. They're looking to just cause problems, and they're hoping that people are going to bite. The best way to deal with these people is to ignore them and carry on what we're doing, which is, living our lives and not letting them affect us, and at the end of the day, showing what a great country we are, and we're more than capable of being independent.
Okay, Sam, that's an excellent last word to finish the programme on today. Well, we've just about come to the end of our allotted time this evening, but I'd just like to remind you that Broadcasting Scotland is currently holding a massive crowdfunder. We need your help to make more programmes in this probably the most important year in Scotland's recent history. So if you really want us to be there covering all the major events of this year, including the general election and a possible referendum after that, please think about becoming a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland. If you can't afford a regular donation of £5 a month, any single donation at all that you can afford is greatly appreciated. And of course, we're always looking for volunteers. So if you have spare time and some skills, please contact us here using our website, broadcastingscotland.scot. Anyway, that's about it from this edition of Scotland at 7 for now. So it just remains for me to thank my two guests, Sam Paton and Fatima Joji, and say a very good night to everyone. Very good night to you.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.